Zane nodded, her focus never wavering. The battle was far from over, but this was humanity's moment. They had proven themselves, showing the Galactic Council just how much Earth had changed. But this was only the beginning. The battle ahead would test every last ounce of strength the humans had. "Keep moving," Zane said, voice steely. "This isn't over. We have a galaxy to take back." As the fleet pressed forward, humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back now. The Galactic Council had made its mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and they would soon see just how costly that mistake would be. Suspense/ending. With a renewed sense of determination, Earth's fleet pressed on, its ships dodging, weaving, and striking at every opportunity. The Galactic Council had no idea how to respond. Humanity had come to prove that they were a force to be reckoned with, and they were just getting started. The battle raged on. In the vastness of space, ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, leaving trails of debris in their wake. The human fleet, once considered a minor force, was now a serious threat to the mighty Galactic Council. Captain Alina Zane's hands tightened on the command console as she watched the chaos unfold on the view screen. The Elysium and the other ships were outnumbered, but they were faster and more precise. Every move was calculated, and every shot fired was a reminder to the Council that humanity would not be easily defeated. "We've lost 3 more ships." Lieutenant Johnson's voice cut through the silence, his tone grim. "But we've taken down 2 of theirs. The momentum is shifting." Zane's eyes flicked across the battlefield. The Council's fleet was growing more disorganized. The human ships, despite their smaller size, were everywhere. Their movements were unpredictable, and their weapons were deadly. The Galactic Council's fleet was struggling to keep up with the speed and precision of humanity's attacks. "Give them no chance to recover," Zane commanded. "Keep hitting them where it hurts." The Elysium surged forward, dodging blasts from a large Council warship, the Scythe. As they closed the distance, the Elysium fired a volley of energy beams, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy. The Scythe rocked violently as its shields began to falter. "We've got them, Captain," Johnson shouted, excitement creeping into his voice. "Their shields are down." "Prepare the missile barrage," Zane ordered. "This is our chance." Humanity's missiles shot through space, slamming into the Scythe's exposed hull. The enemy ship shook violently, its engines sputtering as fires broke out across its surface. Within moments, the Scythe was no more, a blazing wreck floating in the void. "The tide is turning, Captain," Johnson said, watching the scene unfold on the screen. "They're retreating." But Zane wasn't ready to let up. She knew the battle was far from over. The Council had a vast fleet, and they wouldn't back down easily. This was just the beginning of the fight for Earth's survival. "Not yet," she said firmly. "We've only just started to make them feel the pressure. We need to keep pushing." As if on cue, a message came through from the Vanguard. It was a coded transmission, one that only Zane could decode. She quickly opened the channel, and a voice crackled through the comms. "Captain Zane," the voice of Captain Matthews from the Vanguard said urgently. "We've detected something. A massive flagship coming from the Council's main fleet. It's heading toward us, and it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. I don't know if our fleet can hold it off." Zane's heart sank. The Galactic Council wasn't about to surrender easily. They were bringing out their ultimate weapon. "Understood, Captain Matthews. We'll be there soon," Zane replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. She turned to her crew. "Prepare for a full assault. We need to stop that flagship before it reaches us." As the Elysium raced toward the incoming threat, the vast shadow of the Council's flagship loomed in the distance. The ship was colossal, its sleek design making it appear invincible. But Zane had seen the power of humanity's fleet, and she knew that they could win. They had the will to fight, and that was something the Galactic Council could never understand. "Captain," Johnson said, his voice tight with tension. "We're getting close. That ship, it's massive. It's going to take everything. We have to destroy it." "I'm counting on it," Zane said. "The Elysium is ready. All ships, follow our lead." Max, a curious little cat, loved to explore. His school was quiet and empty after hours, the perfect place for an adventure. Each day, after the last bell rang, Max would sneak away from the other cats, his little paws padding softly on the cold floors. The classrooms were dark, and the hallways were eerily silent. But tonight was different. Tonight, Max couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As Max wandered through the long, empty hallways, the stillness around him grew more intense. He stopped near the old, dusty lockers and peered down the dim corridor. The silence was thick, but it wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, as if something was waiting in the shadows, watching. Max's fur bristled with unease. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. But then he heard it. A soft, faint whisper. It was so quiet at first that Max thought it was just his imagination. He shook his head, but the sound came again, like the rustling of paper in the wind. Max's ears twitched, straining to catch any other sound. He slowly turned toward the source. The whisper was coming from deeper within the school. Max's body froze for a moment, a chill running through him. There was no one else in the building. So what was making that noise? Max hesitated but then decided to follow the sound. He padded carefully down the hallway, the only light coming from a flickering overhead bulb. Each step he took seemed to make the whisper grow louder. It was as though the sound was calling him, drawing him closer. Max's paws moved more quickly now, his curiosity taking over his fear. He turned a corner, and suddenly, everything changed. The sound stopped. Max stopped in his tracks. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his breath came out in quick, shaky gasps. The hallway before him was completely still. There was no whisper anymore, just silence. But Max couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, just out of sight. Something. Watching. Max's wide eyes scanned the dark hallway ahead. His tail twitched nervously behind him, and his fur stood on end. He took a step forward, then another, and then he saw it. A shadow. It was small, moving just beyond the reach of the flickering light. For a moment, Max thought it was just a trick of the light, but then the shadow moved again. It was unmistakable. The shadow looked like a cat, but something was off. It was transparent, its edges blurry like smoke. Max's heart skipped a beat. What was that? He was sure it wasn't just his imagination this time. He had seen something. But what was it? Max swallowed hard, his paws shaking slightly as he inched closer. He opened his mouth to call out, but his voice caught in his throat. There was something about the shadow that made him hesitate. It wasn't the friendly, familiar feeling he got when he saw another cat. No, this felt different. This felt wrong. The shadow didn't move in the usual way. It drifted, floating, almost as if it was weightless, and the air around it seemed colder. Max took another step closer, his eyes wide with curiosity, but also fear. He needed to know what it was. Was it a ghost, a trick, or something else? He needed answers. But as he stepped forward, the shadow seemed to notice him. It stopped moving, and for a moment, everything went still again. Max held his breath. The air was thick, almost suffocating. He couldn't see the shadow clearly now. It was like it had disappeared, blending into the darkness. But Max didn't feel safe anymore. The whisper came back, but this time it was louder. It sounded like a voice, soft but desperate. Max's ears flattened against his head. He couldn't understand what it was saying, but the tone sent a chill down his spine. He turned quickly and bolted down the hallway, his paws carrying him faster than ever before. He didn't know what he had seen, but it was enough to make him run. His heart was racing, and his breath was shallow as he scrambled through the corridors, looking for the way out. But as he ran, the whispers followed him. They were everywhere, in the walls, in the air, echoing in his ears. Max's mind was racing. What was going on? Why was this happening? He wasn't sure if the whispers were real or if he was losing his mind, but one thing was certain. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Something strange was happening at his school, something beyond what he could understand. He reached the exit doors, his paws skidding to a stop as he tried to push them open. But they wouldn't budge. They were stuck. Max panicked, pulling harder, but the doors wouldn't open. His tail flicked nervously, and he heard the whispers again, closer this time. Max looked around frantically, searching for a way out, but it felt like the whole school was closing in on him. The whispers surrounded him, but no one was there. The strange shadow, the eerie voices, it was all too much. Max's eyes darted around the empty hallway, the hairs on his back standing up. Just as panic began to take over, he heard a soft meow, a voice, gentle and calm. It wasn't the whispering voice from before, but it was familiar. It was the voice of a cat. But who? Who could it be? Max turned toward the voice, his heart beating faster. He wasn't alone after all. Max's heart was still racing as he stood frozen in the hallway. The sound of whispers was almost deafening now, swirling around him like an invisible fog. The air felt thick, as if it were pressing in from all sides. His fur stood on end, and his paws trembled, but he refused to move. He knew he had to figure out what was happening. Just then, he heard it again, the soft, eerie meow. It was so gentle, but there was something unsettling about it. It didn't sound like a friendly greeting, but more like a cry for help. The sound seemed to come from the direction of the darkened staircase at the end of the hallway. Max hesitated. What if it was a trap? What if it wasn't a real cat? But his curiosity pushed him forward, and with a shaky breath, he padded towards the stairs. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist as he moved. Max's eyes scanned the dark corners of the school, but all he could see was the endless blackness. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. He stopped at the bottom of the staircase and stared up. The stairs led to the second floor, a place Max rarely ventured. The hallway above was even darker, the old, cracked light bulbs flickering faintly. Taking a deep breath, Max started to climb. The steps creaked beneath him, echoing through the silence. His eyes never left the top of the stairs, where the soft mewing had come from. Was it just his imagination playing tricks on him, or was there really something, or someone, up there? When Max reached the second floor, everything seemed to go still. The whispers stopped. The air was thick and cold, and his breath came out in little clouds, visible in the chill. He crept down the narrow hallway, looking for any sign of the mysterious cat he had heard. The dim light barely illuminated the way ahead, casting long, strange shadows against the walls. Max's heart pounded in his chest. There was a strange energy in the air, like static before a storm. It made the fur on his neck rise. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Max saw it. A shadow. Not just any shadow, but the same translucent figure he had glimpsed earlier. It was standing at the end of the hallway, motionless, but its eyes, those glowing, eerie eyes, locked onto Max. Max's breath caught in his throat. This time, there was no doubt. It wasn't a trick of the light or his imagination. The shadow was real, and it was waiting for him. Before he could move, the figure began to drift toward him, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. Max felt his heart race again, his paws frozen in place. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The figure seemed to glide effortlessly, its faint form flickering like smoke in the air. "Who are you?" Max finally managed to whisper, his voice barely audible. The shadow stopped in front of him, hovering in the dim light. Its eyes glowed softly, and for a moment, Max thought he saw a flicker of something. A memory, a feeling, inside those eyes. It wasn't just an eerie glow. It was something deeper, something that made Max's heart ache. The shadow opened its mouth, But instead of speaking, it made a soft, mournful sound. It was like a meow, but stretched, distorted, too human-like. Max took a cautious step back. "What do you want?" The figure seemed to sway, as if caught in the breeze. Then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, it spoke. "Help me." Max's fur stood on end at the sound of the voice. It was unlike anything he had ever heard, so distant, yet so close. It sounded almost desperate. Max didn't know what to make of it. A ghost, a lost spirit, or something else entirely. "Help you? What do you mean?" Max's voice trembled, but his curiosity pushed him forward despite his fear. He couldn't turn away now, not when he had come so far. The shadow's form flickered again, growing more solid for just a moment. It seemed to be trying to show something, but Max couldn't tell what it was. The hallway around him seemed to stretch into infinity, the walls twisting and shifting, making the school feel like a maze. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the corridor, making Max shiver. The shadow jerked back, as if startled, and for the briefest second, Max saw the outline of a cat's tail swaying in the dark. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. What is this?" Max stammered, his voice now filled with confusion. The air was thick with tension, the temperature dropping even further. "I can't rest until it's undone," the shadow murmured, its voice trailing off, almost like it was fading away. Max stepped forward, determined not to let the mysterious cat disappear. He needed answers. "What do you need me to do? How can I help you?" The shadow seemed to hesitate for a moment, and Max could have sworn it looked grateful. Then, just as quickly, it began to fade, slipping into the darkness, its eyes still glowing in the dark. "Find the truth," was the last thing Max heard before the shadow was gone. Max stood there, his heart still pounding, his mind racing. What truth? What was this shadow? And why had it chosen him? Max knew he couldn't just walk away. He had to find out more. He had to understand what was going on in this school, before it was too late. As Max turned to leave the dark hallway, a feeling of dread washed over him. He wasn't alone anymore. And whatever had just happened, whatever he had just encountered, was only the beginning of something far bigger. Max's paws were shaking as he retraced his steps through the dark, narrow hallway. The cold air seemed to cling to him, making each breath feel heavier than the last. His mind was racing. What was that shadow? And what did it mean by the truth? There had to be something he was missing, something important that he hadn't yet discovered. As Max padded down the hallway, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. The eerie feeling of being watched hadn't left him. The whispers, faint but persistent, seemed to be following him, curling around the corners of the school like an invisible hand. Max couldn't shake the sensation that the ghostly presence was still near, just waiting for him to understand. Max turned a corner and entered the school's library. He always found solace in the familiar rows of books, their comforting smell of paper and ink calming his nerves. But tonight, even the library felt different. The air was thick with something that Max couldn't place, something that made his fur bristle. The faintest sound of pages flipping reached his ears, and for a moment, Max froze. He wasn't alone. His eyes darted around the room, but there was no one there. Just rows and rows of dusty books. Yet something in the back of his mind told him he wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched intensified. Then he saw it. On a nearby shelf, a book lay open, its pages flipping on their own, as if a gust of wind were gently blowing through the pages. But the windows were closed. There was no breeze. Max felt a chill run down his spine. The book's pages stopped flipping abruptly, and it lay there, as though waiting for him to come closer. Max approached cautiously, his paws light on the floor as he stepped toward the book. It was an old, leather-bound book with a worn cover, almost as if it had been forgotten for decades. The title was faded, barely legible, but Max could make out a single word: Whispers. His heart skipped a beat. Whispers. Could this be connected to the strange voice he had heard earlier? Max couldn't deny the growing suspicion that this book was important, perhaps the key to understanding everything. He opened the book slowly, careful not to disturb anything. The pages were yellowed with age, and the text inside was written in elegant old-fashioned script. Max squinted at the words, trying to make sense of them. Max's thoughts raced as he left the library behind. The book's eerie warnings echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled deeper into something he didn't fully understand. The presence that had haunted him, the shadowy cat, the whispers, was still there, lurking just out of sight. And now, with the cryptic message in the book, Max knew he was no longer dealing with simple ghost stories. There was something far darker at play in this school, and it wanted something from him. He padded down the hall, the wooden floor creaking beneath his paws. The school was empty now, with only the soft sound of his steps breaking the silence. The dim lighting cast long shadows along the walls, and every corner seemed to hold something just out of view. The hair on the back of Max's neck stood up as he paused to listen. The whispers were back, but this time, they were louder, closer. Max's ears perked up, his body tensing. They were coming from the stairwell again, the very place he had encountered the shadow earlier. He glanced back down the hall. Should he go back? Should he face whatever was waiting for him, or was it too dangerous? He hesitated, but a strange compulsion tugged at him, urging him forward. The whispers weren't going to stop. They wanted him to follow them. With a deep breath, Max turned and started down the stairs. The air grew colder as he descended, the whispers louder, more insistent, until they felt like a weight pressing on his mind. He had to know what they wanted, had to understand why he was being drawn into this mystery. He had no choice but to continue. As Max reached the bottom of the stairs, a sudden gust of wind swept through the hallway, making the candles flicker and casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. The whispers grew frantic, but now they sounded like voices, like real voices, not the soft meows he had heard before. "Help! Us!" a voice croaked, its tone filled with desperation. "Find the cat." Max froze. He recognized that voice. It was the same one from before, the one that had spoken through the shadow. But now, it was clear. It was pleading. It wanted him to find something, or someone. "Who are you?" Max called out, his voice shaky. "What do you want?" The shadows around him seemed to shift. They writhed, twisting as though they were alive, crawling up the walls and into the corners of the room. And then, before Max could react, he saw it, a figure in the distance, standing at the far end of the hallway. It was faint, like smoke, but he could make out the silhouette of a cat. It was the same cat, the ghostly figure from the library. Max's heart skipped a beat. The cat's eyes glowed softly in the darkness, and it seemed to be waiting for him, its body flickering and vanishing in and out of view. The coldness in the air grew, and Max felt a chill run through him. The presence was stronger now, more real than ever. The figure moved, but slowly, too slowly, like it was drifting in slow motion. It stopped just a few feet from Max, its eyes never leaving him. There was no sound, just the soft rustling of the cat's fur as it swayed in the unnatural breeze. Max's paws felt frozen in place, but he couldn't look away. The figure seemed to be waiting for him to approach, as if it had a message to deliver, something important. With a deep breath, Max took a step forward, his instincts telling him that he was on the edge of something important. As he drew closer, the temperature dropped even further, and he could feel the hairs on his fur stand up. The ghostly cat opened its mouth, but instead of speaking, it made that same eerie meow. It sounded almost mournful, like a cry from another world. Max's mind was spinning. What was this cat trying to tell him? Why had it appeared to him again? And why was it so desperate for him to find the truth? Before Max could ask another question, the figure began to fade, its form flickering out of existence like smoke in the wind. Max's heart sank. No, he couldn't lose it now. He had to know what was going on. But just as the figure vanished completely, something strange happened. The air around Max shimmered, and suddenly, the walls of the school seemed to stretch and warp, as if the very building itself was alive. The whispers grew louder, and Max could feel the ground beneath his paws rumble, as though something was stirring deep within the school. Then, a new sound, soft but unmistakable, the sound of something, or someone, moving. Max's heart leaped into his throat. It wasn't the cat anymore. This sound was different. It was heavy, rhythmic, like footsteps. But they were unlike anything Max had heard before. These footsteps were slow, deliberate, almost as if something was trying to make its presence known. Max backed up, his senses on high alert. Whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Max could feel his pulse quicken as the footsteps grew louder. They were coming closer, closer, and Max knew that whatever was about to happen, he wouldn't be able to stop it. The shadows around him seemed to deepen, and Max's ears strained to catch any hint of what was coming. The cat's ghost had led him here, but now, it seemed like something darker was taking over. He didn't know what was waiting for him in the shadows, but one thing was certain. Max was in the middle of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. Something ancient. Something terrifying. And whatever it was coming for him. Max's pulse raced as the footsteps grew louder, the sound growing closer with every passing second. He didn't know where to go or how to escape. The shadows around him seemed to close in, and the air felt thick with a coldness that cut through his fur. His heart was pounding in his chest as he tried to make sense of what was happening. What was that presence, and why was it so drawn to him? He couldn't take it anymore. Max needed answers. The whispers, the shadows, the cat, it was all connected, and he knew that he was the one who had to solve the mystery. But where could he go to find the truth? What could he do to stop whatever was coming? Max's eyes darted around the hall, searching for any sign of where to go next. And that's when he saw it. At the end of the hallway, hidden behind a thick curtain of cobwebs, was a door. It was old and weathered, its wood cracked and faded, but there was something about it that called to Max. It looked different from the other doors he had seen in the school. There was an aura about it, something strange and ancient. It was as if the door itself was holding a secret, something that no one was meant to discover. Max felt a strange pull, an irresistible force urging him toward the door. Without thinking, he padded toward it, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up as he approached. The footsteps had stopped now, but the tension in the air had only grown stronger. The whispers were more intense than ever, filling his head with voices he couldn't understand. As Max reached for the handle, the door creaked open by itself, as if it had been waiting for him. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, but there was an undeniable feeling of something old and forgotten, lurking inside. Max hesitated for only a moment before stepping through. The moment he crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped even further. A wave of cold swept over him, chilling him to the bone. The room was so dark that Max could barely make out his own paws, but he felt a presence, something large and heavy, looming in the shadows. Max's instincts told him to turn back, to flee the room and never look back. But his curiosity, his need for answers, pushed him forward. He took a tentative step, then another, the sound of his paws echoing in the silence. Each step felt heavier, as though the very air around him was trying to hold him in place. Then, as his eyes began to adjust to the darkness, he saw it, something on the far wall. A faint, glowing light, barely visible but unmistakable. Max moved closer, drawn to it like a magnet. The closer he got, the clearer the light became, and as he reached the wall, he finally understood. There, etched into the stone, was a massive ancient symbol. It was a circle with intricate patterns and lines, almost like a seal. And in the center of the circle was a cat, just like the ghostly cat that had been haunting Max. The symbol seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and Max felt a shiver run down his spine as he stared at it. The air around him seemed to hum, the whispers growing louder and more frantic. Max couldn't tell if the voices were coming from inside his head or from the walls around him. All he knew was that the symbol was important. It was the key to understanding everything. Max reached out a trembling paw and touched the symbol. The moment his paw made contact, the ground beneath him trembled, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. A low rumble filled the room, like the sound of something large moving deep below the surface. Max jumped back, his heart racing. The symbol was glowing now, brighter than ever before, and the entire room seemed to shake with power. The walls groaned, as though they were alive. Max's fur stood on end, and he backed away from the symbol, his eyes wide with fear. Then a voice, deep, raspy, and full of sorrow, spoke from the shadows. "You have found it," the voice said. "The key to the truth." Max froze. He hadn't seen anyone. He didn't know where the voice was coming from, but it was clear there was something or someone in the room with him. Something ancient and powerful. "Who are you?" Max asked, his voice trembling. "What is this place?" The voice didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a long pause, and Max could feel the presence in the room growing stronger, more oppressive. "Long ago," the voice began, "this school was built upon a secret, an ancient power that has been lost to time. The cat that haunts these halls is a guardian, one who watches over the door that leads to the other side. The seal you have found is the key to unlocking that door." Max's mind was spinning. The other side. What did that mean? And what was this guardian the voice spoke of? "But why me?" Max asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why am I the one who is here?" The voice let out a heavy sigh. "Because you are the one who can open the door. You are the one who will uncover the truth that has been hidden for centuries." Max's heart pounded in his chest. He was no longer sure what was real and what was just a nightmare. The school, the ghostly cat, the whispers, they were all tied together in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. But one thing was certain. He had a choice to make. The presence in the room seemed to watch him, waiting for his next move. The seal on the wall pulsed again, and Max felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. What would he do? Would he open the door and risk everything? Or would he turn away and leave the secrets buried forever? Max's mind was a storm of emotions, fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of purpose. He didn't know what lay beyond that door, but he knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when the truth was so close. He took a deep breath, his paws steadying as he prepared to face whatever came next. Max stood frozen, staring at the glowing symbol etched into the stone wall. His heart pounded in his chest, the air thick with an oppressive weight as the voice echoed in his mind. "You are the one who will uncover the truth." What truth? What had he just learned, and what exactly had he gotten himself into? The walls of the forgotten room seemed to close in on him, and Max's instincts screamed at him to run. But he couldn't. Not now. He was so close, closer than anyone had ever been to unraveling the mystery that had haunted the school for as long as he could remember. He glanced at the symbol once more, feeling its strange pull as if it were alive, yearning to be unlocked. But was he ready to face whatever lay behind it? Max didn't know what awaited him if he opened the door. The voice had mentioned the other side, but what did that mean? Was this something that would change his life forever? Or was it something dangerous, something that had been sealed away for a reason? With a deep breath, Max stepped closer to the wall, his eyes never leaving the symbol. His paws felt heavy, as though each movement carried the weight of a decision that could alter everything. Max placed a trembling paw on the glowing circle. The moment his paw made contact, the room shook. The ground beneath him vibrated as though it were about to give way. A high-pitched sound filled the air, and the symbol beneath his paw pulsed brighter, flooding the room with light. Max recoiled, his fur standing on end as the energy in the air intensified. He didn't have time to second-guess himself. The voice had spoken of a door. Max had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The symbol beneath his paw twisted, the lines on the wall shifting and rearranging, until a sudden burst of light revealed a small crack in the stone, a hidden door. It was barely visible, but it was there, and it was glowing. Max stepped back, wide-eyed. The door was real. It was happening. For a moment, everything went still. The world outside the forgotten room seemed to vanish as Max focused solely on the glowing doorway. His heart raced, and he felt a mix of excitement and fear. Was he truly ready to step into the unknown? Before he could think any longer, the door creaked open, slowly and with an eerie sound, as though it hadn't been opened in centuries. The darkness beyond the door felt almost alive, like it was waiting to swallow him whole. The whispers returned, louder now, more urgent, almost frantic. They came from inside the door, beckoning him forward. Max stood frozen, unsure whether to take the first step. The school had been strange enough already. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The soft, glowing eyes of the ghostly cat appeared in the darkness behind the door, watching Max with a look of sorrow. It meowed, its voice distant but clear, and Max could sense its sadness, its plea. It was waiting for him to follow. Max's instincts told him to run, but his curiosity, the need to uncover the truth, held him in place. He took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of no return. Max stepped forward, his paws touching the threshold of the doorway. The moment he did, a cold, tingling sensation rushed through his fur, making every part of him tingle with energy. The door seemed to swallow him whole, and in an instant he was no longer in the forgotten room. Max blinked, disoriented. The world around him was different, strange, and yet strangely familiar. He was no longer in the school. Before him stretched an endless, dark forest. The trees loomed high above, their twisted branches reaching out like long fingers, blocking out any light. The ground beneath Max's paws felt soft and uneven, and the air was thick with mist. He couldn't see anything beyond the trees, but he knew that something was there, watching. Max took another step into the strange world, his heart racing. What was this place, and why had the ghostly cat brought him here? The whispering voices that had followed him throughout the school now filled the air, swirling around him like an invisible wind. They weren't speaking English, at least not in any language Max could understand, but the tone was unmistakable, desperate, pleading. As Max ventured deeper into the forest, he felt a presence drawing near. It wasn't the cat this time. No, this was something darker, something far more dangerous. The temperature in the air dropped even further, and Max could feel a weight in his chest as though the very atmosphere was pressing down on him. The trees began to sway, their branches creaking, and a cold gust of wind swept past him. The whispering voices grew louder, more frantic. Max's fur stood on end, and his ears flattened against his head as a low growl rumbled from the distance. It was close now, whatever was waiting for him. Max's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the sound, but all he could see were the dark, towering trees. There was something moving in the shadows, something large, something menacing. He could feel its gaze, heavy and predatory. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him. It was massive, towering over him. Its eyes glowed red, and its form was shadowy, barely visible in the mist. Max froze. The growling came again, louder this time. It wasn't just a sound. It was a warning. The creature loomed closer, and Max knew that whatever this was, it wasn't friendly. Max's heart raced as the creature in the mist took another step forward. Its glowing red eyes locked onto him, its presence overwhelming. Every muscle in Max's body screamed for him to run, to escape the nightmare he had just walked into. But the whispers around him had grown silent now, and he was left alone with the beast that seemed to have emerged from the darkness itself. The creature's form shifted, its shadowy figure flickering in and out of the mist like a bad dream. Max could barely make out its features, a massive, monstrous figure with long, gnarled limbs and sharp, jagged claws. It was like nothing he had ever seen, and it was closing in on him. The growling sound came again, low and guttural, vibrating through the ground beneath Max's paws. He could feel it in his chest, deep and menacing, like the earth itself was warning him. Max felt his tail puff up in terror. He couldn't back away any further. The creature had him cornered in this dark, twisted forest, and he had no idea how to fight something like this. What was it? Why was it here? A sudden, cold breeze blew through the trees, rustling the leaves like whispers in the night. Max's instincts told him he needed to act. He couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear. The ghostly cat had led him here for a reason, and he wasn't about to give up now. Max squared his shoulders, his body trembling as he faced the creature. Despite the overwhelming fear clawing at him, he took a step forward, determined to uncover the truth. The creature paused, its red eyes narrowing, and for a moment, everything fell silent. Max could feel the weight of its gaze, but he refused to look away. He wasn't going to be intimidated. In that stillness, something strange happened. The air around Max seemed to shimmer, and the world began to change. The trees that had towered over him now seemed to move, shifting as if they were alive. The ground beneath him cracked, and Max could feel a strange pulse of energy in the air, like a heartbeat. The creature growled again, but this time it sounded different. It was less threatening, more confused. Max's mind raced. The creature wasn't just some monster. It was a part of this place. It was connected to the mystery of the school, the symbol, and the ghostly cat. Max realized now that he hadn't been brought here just to confront it. He had been brought to understand it. The creature's growl softened, turning into something almost like a sigh. It took a step back, and the tension in the air seemed to ease. Max couldn't understand what was happening, but he could sense that the creature was no longer a threat. It was waiting for something. Max stepped closer, his fur bristling with the energy in the air. As he drew near, he saw something that sent a shock through his system. A faint, glowing symbol on the creature's chest. It was the same symbol that had been on the wall in the forgotten room, the one that had triggered the door to this strange world. The connection was clear now. Max reached out a trembling paw, and for the first time, the creature did not growl or lash out. Instead, it stood still, allowing him to touch the symbol. The moment his paw made contact, a blinding light flooded the forest, and Max felt himself being pulled into it. The creature's form flickered, and the world around him began to dissolve into a swirl of colors. Max's body felt weightless, as if he were floating through space, and the light around him grew brighter, more intense. The world he had known, the school, the ghostly cat, the whispers, they all seemed to fade away, leaving Max with nothing but the sensation of falling. He wanted to scream, but no sound escaped him. His body felt as though it were being stretched thin, pulled in 100 different directions. His mind raced as he tried to comprehend what was happening. Was this the end, or was it just the beginning? Then, in an instant, everything stopped. Max opened his eyes. The world around him had changed once again. He was back in the forgotten room, standing before the now closed door. The forest, the creature, the glowing symbol, they were all gone, like they had never existed. Max blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a dream? No, he knew better than that. The energy, the presence, it had all been real. Something had shifted, something had changed. He turned back toward the glowing symbol on the wall. It had faded, no longer pulsing with energy, but there was still an undeniable sense of something unfinished. The mystery was far from over, and Max knew that his journey had only just begun. As he looked around the room, a familiar sound reached his ears, a soft, sorrowful meow. Max spun around, and there, in the shadows, stood the ghostly cat. Its eyes glowed faintly, but there was something different about it now. It was no longer a menacing presence. It was peaceful, almost content. The ghostly cat stepped forward, its form solidifying before Max's eyes. For the first time, it looked at him with kindness, its gaze filled with understanding. "You've done it," the cat said, its voice no longer haunting, but gentle. "The door is closed. The truth is yours." Max felt a sense of relief wash over him. The danger had passed, but the mystery remained. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. And Max knew, deep down, that the school's secrets were still waiting to be uncovered. But for now, he had done what no one else could. He had faced the darkness, uncovered the truth, and survived. Whatever came next, he would be ready.